talking about my perspective, having moved up here, I think it's one of the challenges most duck hunters face, and I've said this lovingly for my whole life because I used to be this person. If you ask me where my ducks come from, I'm going to tell you from over those trees right there, unless the wind's coming out of the south, and then they're going to come from
It's coming around
trees.
there. Yeah.
I think we've just recently woken up to how bad it really is in terms of the public hunting lands.
So you have one duck hunt that you get to take. You have one.
I should have known this.
And you have to pick it. You don't get an out, no wiggle rooms here. You have one place to go, one setting, one style. Maybe you get a couple species. I'll give you that much wiggle room. But where are you going?
Well, you're boxing me in, but I'm gonna answer it. No political responses here. No evading.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna quit disclaiming and just say it. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Delta Waterfowl is the duck hunters organization, and what we're doing is managing out here to increase duck production.
The Voice of the Duck Hunter, a podcast presented by Delta Waterfowl. Brought to you by Rig'em and Lucky Duck.
Welcome to Delta Waterfowl's The Voice of the Duck Hunter podcast. I'm your host, Joel Brice. On today's episode, I'm sitting down with longtime Delta Waterfowl employee and new CEO, Jason Tharpe. Jason's a lifelong avid waterfowler who grew up duck hunting in his home state of Louisiana and ultimately followed his passion to Delta Waterfowl. For the past 23 years, he's worked tirelessly to advance and shape the Duck Hunters organization into what it is today. We'll discuss his leadership style, his goals for the future of Delta, and his strategy to help us fill the skies with ducks up and down all four flyways. This includes Jason's perspectives on producing ducks in the modern era and how to best create new quality opportunities for duck hunters, all delivered with his straight shooting style. With that introduction, let's get started. Jason Tharpe, welcome to the Delta Waterfowl podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Weird.
It is a little bit.
Yeah, it's weird.
A little bit.
I mean, for one, this is your first appearance on the podcast.
It is.
You're getting good at video, by the way.
Thanks.
You are. Yeah, you are. And then the other part is
Pretty steep learning curve.
You're freshly Delta's chief executive officer. We've worked together for 23 or 4 years or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm an 01, you're an 02.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So looking at it, all this time later, it's like two guys who've worked with each other for so long, know each other so well, and now we're going to unbox Jason Tharpe to our listeners.
Exciting.
It is exciting. Congrats, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the CEO designation, give us the timeline of that. Like just kind of.
Yeah, back in February, as boards often do, long discussions, lots of deliberation. Changes in leadership, I think, are very common. For me, this role is, it's a lot like being a coach of maybe a professional team. It's not meant to be a lifetime gig. It's a time, and so board made a decision that it was time to change the guard, and came to me and approached me, and yeah, after some good discussion, let's give it a go. So I'm going to try to do my best for the few years that I get to steward, and see if we can produce some ducks and secure the future waterfowling.
Rig'em is an industry leader in high-quality waterfowl gear and proud partner of Delta Waterfowl. From blind bags, backpacks, and gun cases to dog vests, dog stands, and dog blinds, Rig'em has you and your hunting dog covered for long days in the duck marsh. And even more exciting, Rig'em has launched its new mainline series decoys that are lightweight, durable, and they look awesome. Check out Rig'em complete lineup at www.rig'emright.com or wherever you buy your hunting gear. Let's get on it. Beautiful. Jason, let's go back into your life. I think one of the things you've been kind of, I would say that there's a lot of people that know Jason Tharpe, the Delta guy.
Yeah.
But it's more, I would wonder, is it more kind of individual relationships? But I think to the masses, you're probably a relatively unknown person.
Yeah, I'd say so.
You know what I mean? Like just as a public figure. And so this is a great opportunity to get to learn a little bit about you. So you grew up in Bastrop, Louisiana. I don't know anything about Bastrop. Tell me, like Main Street, 2 stoplights, 1 bar? What is Bastrop like?
You know, Bastrop was a international paper company mill town when I was born there. I grew up there. So 22,000 people, I think, at its peak. And the mill, I want to say, employed about 1,250 of those. And then a lot of the remaining sort of good jobs, good paying jobs, were organizations, companies that supported the mill. So welding shops, you know, that sort of thing, distribution, logistics. So both my granddads worked at the paper mill. My dad worked at the paper mill. So everybody that I knew, and in town, every sort of adult male that I knew in town either worked at the mill or had some relationship to the mill. So it was very much centered around that, but really normal. I mean, it's really interesting. I think a lot of people try to find interesting things about their past. Mine is terribly boring. It's just my dad worked. My mom was a stay-home mom. Hunting and fishing was absolutely central to our life. But it was still, you know, when I reflect on it, it was still very much a subsistence type situation. I've told people this over the years that there were 2 15 cubic foot freezers in the kitchen of our home. One of them was full of catfish, and one of them was full of either deer, duck, quail, you know, other things we hunted. I mean, we ate wild game typically 3 or 4 nights a week. It was just part of our life. It just I didn't even think there was anything interesting or special about it because, and you know, I love. I'm very fond of fried deer steak, by the way, and so it's one of my favorite meals. And so yeah, it was just part of how I grew up. It was part of my life. It was very normal, middle class. You know, went to the same school in kindergarten as people I graduated high school with. It's just sort of small town, typical. You know, even when I was in high school, we weren't yet at the point of, you know, having gun-free zones and things like that. It was still very much, you know, you could throw your shotgun in the truck kind of thing and whatever.
Back window kind of situation.
Yeah, it was very, very normal sort of thing. So yeah, it was just sort of baked into who we were and what we did. We just had that sort of outdoor lifestyle, very normal. Yeah, I don't know what to say about it.
That's good. Yeah, I mean,
I've searched it for interesting pieces. Yeah. It's like, man, it's not that interesting. It was just.
Well, tell you what, couldn't have beat Fall Creek, Wisconsin. No, small town USA. That's where I'm from.
Yeah.
But so hunting was always a part of your life, and I think, well, I know this from prior conversations. You hunted deer, you hunted ducks. What are some of the other things that you hunted growing up? Squirrels?
Oh, absolutely. I still hunt squirrels, although there's only 4 trees in North Dakota, so it's easy to find them. But no, we hunted squirrels. You know, again, a typical day might look like, well, it's hard to say there was a typical day, but a typical hunting day wasn't just a big event. It was maybe we were bird hunting, and then maybe we were deer hunting in the same day. I mean, it's just squirrel hunt in the morning, deer hunt in the afternoon, whatever, duck hunt, squirrel hunt, deer hunt. It just, I'd say the main difference, if I think about today, how much more identity seems to emerge as a particular type of hunter. I'm a deer hunter, I'm a bow hunter, you know, that kind of thing. I don't recall we thought in those terms. Nobody. There was game, and there were opportunities, and there was food, and we just.
I think so too. Yeah, I mean, I do recall as a kid we hunted everything we could. So I was a hunter who happened to have a particular love of waterfowling.
Right.
But I hunted it. It sounds like that was a kind of a similar thing for you.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. One of the aspects of my history with waterfowling is that my dad was, I would call him, he was one of the victims of some of the regulations and changes that came in the 70s and 80s with lead, switching to non-toxic, point systems, things like that. And I think that had a lot to do with his sort of sustenance-based perspective on hunting. This was part of how he fed his family, and so it became just not economically as viable. But my granddad, and a very close friend of his, who's my southern friends will appreciate this name. His name was Willie Johns. That was his full name. We all called him by his full name all the time, but my granddad and Willie Johns were primarily the duck hunters, and so that's where my history with duck hunting comes from, is with them. And my dad was still around it, but it was just it's very natural thing. He just kind of moved away. But quail hunting was very big for us. If anything, I might even say, if I had to pick something, I might say quail hunting may have been the biggest thing, and that was because my dad and granddad kept, trained, bred Brittany Spaniels. And so my first job, if you will, as a young man, or chore, depending on how I didn't get paid for it, so it was a chore, I cleaned pens and fed dogs twice a day. So that was, but again, it was just baked into our life, right? Like, so we didn't, I got old enough to do it, and I assume my dad didn't want to. So there you go. I was out dealing with the dogs or whatever, but reloading shotgun shells, I mean, it was just, again, none of these things were that interesting in any way. It was just part of our life. We have it's not a family camp, it's sort of a group camp. A number of families have been hunting in South Arkansas, around Strong, for a long time, most of my life. And yeah, my mom would pick my brother and I up when school was out at 3 o'clock. Brother and I went to the same school, small town, and we'd hop in the car. She'd have our clothes for hunting, and we'd leave, go to the camp. We'd be there till Sunday afternoon, and then we'd load up and go back to school. That was what most of my fall and winters looked like.
Nice. Honing in on duck hunting, was there a moment that you can remember early duck hunting where you go, wow, this is for me? I like to duck hunt.
I don't know if I can say that for sure. That moment probably came for me after I moved out of the house and started being able to get to be mobile myself, right? And had, income and I could spend on things, and then got around people that were my age, was more interested in. But so not really. Again, I hunted my whole life. I didn't even know hunting was a thing people didn't do. Everyone that I knew hunted, like extended family, friends, everybody. So I would say that moment, that really the passion for waterfowling probably came for me in my later teens, maybe early 20s, is really when but I would say, we shot deer every year. We were deer hunters, but I would call my family bird hunters generally. Yeah. We were wing shooters. I grew up on the shotgun. My first deer hunting rifle was a shotgun, right? So yeah, I would say I had a passion for wing shooting early, for sure. But for the waterfowling, it came a little later. Sort of, I started dialing in, like, this is where I want to spend my time.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with I don't want to be. My dad's probably going to listen to this, so I got to be careful. But deer hunting was serious business, right? You collect a lot of meat, and so you get on the stand with a flashlight, come off the stand with a flashlight, and I'm not exceptional in that way. I've talked to a lot of guys that grew up hunting that way, and so quite honestly, it was boring. A lot of times you're sitting in the stand all day with a bologna sandwich and a oatmeal cookie, and so duck hunting is much more social. Bird hunting generally is. You're talking and you're moving sometimes, and so yeah, I think it was the social aspect of waterfowling that I really keyed in on, and yeah,
I do think. Sidebar conversation, but I just kind of have to expand on it a little bit. I think, as hunters, we change from early hunting to later in life. Our values change, and so what I find is that, like your story, it repeats itself in different rooms, different states, different families, where the kid goes, man, duck hunting or deer hunting was so cool when the deer came through, but I was so bored the rest of the time. But what you find is dad is in a different stage than son or daughter, or mom, dad, or different stage than mother, daughter. So the dad, let's go with the dad on this one, just can't wait to sit in the sand and not listen to the phone, no TV, no responsibility. I'm just going to sit here and this is great.
Right.
And the kid wants action, right?
Yeah.
And so that's always something to keep in mind, I think, when introducing your own kids or other kids, is deer hunting's awesome, but it can be a little bit too much for some.
Oh, for sure. I certainly had that in mind when my two boys came along, and hunting was in the early days for them. for sure was very much about the experience. Lots of snacks. You want to have lots of snacks, lots of hot cocoa, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think you're right about that. And being a kid, it's hard to sit still for a long time, that sort of thing. But even then, I can tell you, I don't even have a first deer. I have a first 3 deer, right? So again, this was very much. I don't want to take all the love and passion and excitement out of hunting, but it was meat collection. That's what we were doing. We wanted to eat deer, and it was Arkansas. So God bless Arkansas. They hand out a lot of deer tags.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Those little suitcase deer.
Yeah, they are. Takes a lot of them. Actually.
Yeah. Hey, quick question for you. I think this is kind of an interesting spot here, is that, so you've lived in North Dakota for the last 20-some years.
Yeah.
Grew up in the South, spent, up until the point, actually, when you and I first met each other, you were living in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So you've spent 30 years or so in the South, and now you've spent the last 20-some in the North. Let's bring this in. Maybe it's a little out of order, but I think it's important. As the CEO of Delta, you bring a very well-rounded perspective when we get on the phone or we're traveling in the South. It's very relatable to you, right?
Mm.
And you bring that perspective with you probably every day to work, the Southern perspective.
Sure.
And then you live here, so obviously you have that as well. So have you finding that to be an asset in your leadership roles at Delta?
Yeah, I think so. You asked the question about passion for waterfowling. It's really interesting. Again, growing up the way I did, it was just sort of what we did, the way we did it. I think it was most people's experiences as young hunters is I didn't know there were different ways to do any of these things. And it was really Delta that, I came to Delta, I think at 26 or 27, and Delta started shipping me all over the place, Michigan, East Coast, places like that. And that actually started opening me up to other types of waterfowling that they were out there, which just made waterfowling cooler for me, layout boats or long lines or whatever it is people are doing differently. But no, I would say for certain, I always have a heart, especially for the southern duck hunter, the last to see the ducks arrive. And so I'm constantly thinking about them, but it is really interesting. I recall when I was young, there were still places that we went, that were sort of open to the public, like paper mill lands or, places like that where there's a lot of opportunity in that way that you just go hunt somewhere. And before I left the South, that changed rapidly. I watched it like happen really quickly where there's just really not a lot of places like that. I mean, there's of course public lands and there's federal lands and things like that, but I would say anything worth hunting, any type of hunting in the southern United States now is it's either lease or you own it or you're in a club or something like that. So, and so that was the biggest difference coming up to North Dakota was, and I'm fearful my North Dakota friends now will get upset with me, but I won't reveal too much. But it's very interesting to me how duck hunting happens up here. It's very different than the South. In the South, it's you're generally going to have a camp. You're going to be at the camp. That's where you're having your meals and everything else. And then the hunting, you're doing in the mornings and the afternoons or however you're doing it. And but say after a morning duck hunt, you come back to the camp and then we're going to make a big breakfast and we're going to turn on college football probably, and we're going to take naps and we'll just be there. In the North, it's very different because in one aspect, the access is a lot different. It's easier. So you're a lot more mobile. You're literally walking up and asking people for permission, and that's long before I left the South. That was just unheard of. Of course not. That's guaranteed to be leased, or that guy hunts, and so you're not going to get permission. But at the same time, there's not really a camp culture up here, and so we meet where we hunt. Generally, we hunt, and then we just go home,
and we go about our lives and
go about
families.
The rest of your life, right?
Yep.
So I'd say in one way it's a positive because of the different types of experiences in the places I hunt, and the access to waterfowl, of course, is just open access is a lot higher up here than what I experienced in the South. But then yet I miss the camp culture. where that was part of it too,
Mhm.
right? Was things that go on at the camp, right? Like
Yeah,
just
yeah.
camp stuff.
No, I do understand that. I've had a few of those experiences through Delta, but not through my personal life.
Yeah.
I mean, growing up, we hunted out the front door.
Yeah.
So our home was our camp. But again, you cut the grass, you do the chores, and then Anyway, enough about that. So everybody, when they're looking for a job, they look at it from the outside and say, okay, I think that's a job that I want to apply for. So going back to 2002, it's a very different Delta then than it is now.
Mm-hmm.
What attracted you to Delta as an early applicant?
Well, that's a good question. The short version is that I went to the Fort Worth Trophy Hunters Extravaganza with some friends, and we joined Delta there. Somebody had a booth, and we joined up. And gosh, we didn't even have a magazine then. I think we were still on mimeograph paper at that point. And I just recall the experience of being introduced to Delta and immediately feeling like this is a really smart organization. Like they know things that I've never heard of, things about ducks, migrations, waterfowl. So that was really interesting. And that led me to an introduction to a board member that had joined ultimately a couple of years later. And his name was Ed Clark. He was in Dallas, Texas, and I was living in East Texas at the time. And so we made a connection. And it's just one of those kismet things. Ed and I just hit it off. He was 35 years older than I was, or more, maybe 40 years. Had grown up in Richmond, similar backgrounds in some ways, different in some ways. Anyway, I went to dinner with him, and it was about a 4-hour dinner. It was really interesting, and I sat there completely enthralled. He was just talking about what Delta was up to. And of course, this is early days of predator management research. This is history of science. The student program was really, really big and flourishing then. And I just came away with this idea that, man, I need to be around this organization. I just want to be around this organization. I felt smarter. I felt like I knew more, and so really, I was in the fire and flood restoration business of all things, doing emergency service work, emergency mitigation work, and I think that was my chosen profession. Actually, that's probably what I thought I was going to do, and then Delta decided to hire its first 4 fundraisers, and Ed called me up and said, "I think you'd be really good at that," And as Ed likes to say, and I'll repeat it on my behalf, is I'm a peddler. If I'm being honest, my real skill set is I peddle things, and so. So yeah, he felt I'd be good for it and thought I should throw my name in the hat. So off to Memphis to the Holiday Inn where we did our first interview and met Rob there. I want to say John Devney was there and another gent. And yeah, that was it. They said, would you like to come on board? And we're trying to get this thing up and going. And so we did. So it was 4 of us. And yeah, those first couple of years, it was kind of chaotic. Not a lot of planning or structure. We just sort of ran around doing stuff, and so yeah, it wasn't. I'd love to tell you I put a lot of long thought, but I was young. There was still plenty of space in my life to decide what I wanted to do with my life, and so yeah, it really was. Excuse me. It was more of a. I think I'll go do this for a couple of years because it sounds really cool. I get to talk to duck hunters all day about duck hunting. Which I'm very passionate about, and I get to, share knowledge and be part of something bigger than me and those sorts of things. And so I really thought, very frankly, I thought it would be a couple, 3 years of my life. Had no sense that this would turn into what it did. And so I'd say for about the first 10 years at Delta, I even bothered to tell people what my real job was, for a long time. Oh, no, I do this, but I've been doing this for a while. So after about a decade, I think is when I figured out, I think this might actually be my job. That's what I do now.
It has a way of sticking, right?
Yeah.
Delta, it sure does. Hey, so CEO today.
Yeah.
But, we started with your first role, regional director, event fundraiser. Then you ran the event system, and then you led development. Actually, you were the chief operating officer before then development, now CEO.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. Like, you've seen, like, if we look at, and we've both been here through the biggest change in terms of growth, maybe diversification of the organization, market share. But what have all of these roles kind of in aggregate taught you that you're taking into your CEO role?
Yeah, I think the main thing is I'm just well-rounded in how Delta operates, how it functions, how it works. And I've been very blessed to be part of what I would consider some very formative years for the modern Delta. You know, Delta's history goes way, way back. But in terms of who we are today, in relation to having a major gifts program, an event program, a membership program, even some of our active management wasn't really part of who we were, to the degree that it is today. And so yeah, I think it just gave me a really well-rounded background. Again, even as a young guy, I had worked for some corporations. I had some business experience when I came to Delta, but there was it's also been a combination of learning on the job, if you will, while I've been here too, and teaching and seeking further education on things like, finances, that kind of thing. I'm not an accountant by training or anything. So yeah, I think it's just given me a well-rounded perspective on Delta, which I think benefits, sort of my vision and where I think the organization wants to go. There's certainly been aspects that I've enjoyed more than others. For me, I think the most physically taxing, of course, is being out in the world. But to me, it's the most interesting and exciting because it's what really has kept me going all these years, is being able to go out and meet with and therefore remember why Delta exists. We exist for duck hunters. That's what we're here for. And so we try to do our best for the ducks, and we try to do our best for the duck hunter. But when you sit down with people and you're reminded and you see that passion, it's really, I think that's what's kept me going. I mean, there have been lots of opportunities to do different things with my career, but just I think it's allowed me to stay and be part of it and be successful as long as I have, because I've had, regardless of what I'm doing, almost throughout that has been opportunities to be out in the world with our members.
I would say there's, every organization faces challenges, and some of them are timeless challenges. They just, by definition, never go away. Do you feel like, Jason, over the time, that our careers have overlapped, do you feel like there's challenges that Delta has faced over time that we still face and probably going to face into the future? Is there kind of a common theme about Delta's existence and what we're trying to overcome?
That's a great question. I would I would say we've overcome a lot. Making a shift as a nonprofit organization from purely being a foundation, which had a trust, had an endowment that James Ford Bell set up, and we funded students. Some of these are stories that were shared with me, but I would say maybe back in the 80s, we had a lot of board members. And as I understand it, once the trust dollars ran out during the year, the board members would just pony up, right? And they sort of paid the bills. To now having a growing and thriving fundraising system and marketing communication system, I'd say we've overcome a lot of those challenges. That to me was the biggest one, is sort of go from this very organizationally centric group to now we have a direct obligation to our members, right? We're responsible to them. They fund us and what we do every day. And so we have an obligation not only to communicate, but to do the most innovative things, to do the things that matter at the moment, that ducks and duck hunters need. And so yeah, I want to give us credit. That said, yeah, sure, there's always more to do and more to improve. But I'd say for the most part, we've come over the biggest obstacles in the time that I've been here.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, there's the outside world, the challenges facing ducks, their habitat, challenges facing hunting. Those are, to me, are always going to be there.
Right.
But yeah, the internal, it's been a lot of change. Exciting.
Yeah, I think it's easy sometimes from the inside to see it differently, but in my attempts to sort of back out and look at Delta's history, especially over the last 20 years, I would actually say we're kind of prototypical of what normally happens with nonprofits. Is you grow up, right? You just have to grow up, and that means you're adapting your programs. What was it? It was 98 before we added our hunting mandate. Right, that was not part of who Delta was historically. But thanks to staff recognizing that, look, hunters in decline, and we're going to have to do something to address the fact that we're losing our waterfowlers. And so, I think we've matured very naturally in the way that you should, by first looking at the environment and understanding what we need to do, and then developing ways to do it and to fund it. And so, I'm really proud of us in that regard. I think today when I look at Delta, I think we're on top of the big issues. I really do. I think we're focused on the right things that matter to ducks and duck hunters, and I'm really proud of us for that.
What opportunities, as the CEO, excite you most? What opportunities ahead of you? Just have that twinkle in your eye.
Yeah, it's hard to separate opportunities from challenges, right? So I'll kind of do a mix of both. But, for sure, one of the things I see right now is the sort of degradation of our public hunting lands. I'd say for sure that's an opportunity for us. I think it's really interesting. I sort of lived through the 90s like many people did, and it'd be easy to look at that time period, especially the late 90s, and call that the last great period for duck hunting. It was pretty phenomenal, all said, but I think something happened as a result of that, where we had this experience, and thanks to CRP and water and all these things happening, and everybody seemed to be having very successful harvest, and in the background of all of that were the beginnings of these declines at our WMAs and our refuges and things like that, and I'm not sure we saw them. I'm not sure we saw them as quickly as they were happening. I recall talking about them. We were talking about the decline of duck hunters, of course, and we understand the North American model and the connection of hunter dollars directly to conservation. And so naturally, as hunters decline, those dollars are going to decline. So we were talking about it, but I think we've just recently woken up to how bad it really is in terms of the public hunting lands. I think one of the opportunities for Delta right now is to address that. These are we're talking about a legacy of conservation. Our refuge system it's our flagship, right? It's the thing we refer to most often, I think, in terms of the things that waterfowl conservation has established and created. And so for me, I think that's an important opportunity for us, is to focus on that. Everything's a challenge when you face it, but I don't know that it's that big of a challenge. I think it's just a matter of putting some attention to it and getting our policymakers focused on the right things. I think generally in North America we've lost a little bit of our focus of game management, and that's been replaced a bit by ecosystem management, species-specific management, species at risk, endangered species, and those are valuable things. Not to diminish them at all, but we need game management, right? It's got to be part of the system, especially as hunters. Someone told me a long time ago that bird watchers love it when there's only one. Right? One is great. As a duck hunter, one is horrible. That would be awful. And so we need healthy populations, and I think our public lands play a big role in that. So, I don't. Hunting generally, I think we're going through a cultural shift right now for sure. We've seen the concentric family circle model break down. You and I have talked about this ad nauseum over the years, but and so that was our traditional model for recruitment, and I think now we're trying to figure out where we fit in society and how we stay relevant as a body, but also how do we continue not just the traditions, but all the good that comes with being a hunter. I've had so many conversations. I've been blessed to meet lots of different people, and I've talked to lots of people who don't hunt, haven't hunted. I've talked to people who don't care for hunting, or maybe even call them anti-hunting. And I think it's easy for those folks not to understand. I think there's so many good lessons that come with being a hunter. It's not a small thing to take a life.
Right. No.
No matter what it is. And so I think the responsibility that comes with that, I think learning from a young age that I have to put back when I take, and I have to be responsible as a steward for these things. And so I don't want to see us lose any of that. I think we all agree on that point. And so, yeah, I think right now we're trying to figure out where we fit. The gun issue, of course, is a big issue in society right now. And so, yeah, I think, it's hard not, as you pointed out, those are the big opportunities, and it's hard not to sort of go to that direction. I think generally at Delta, things are good. Things are well, and we're in good shape, and the organization's functioning well. It's just how do we, in the time frame we have, how do we tackle these big issues that are facing North American ducks?
Lucky Duck is a proud partner of Delta Waterfowl. While being an industry leader in waterfowl motion decoys is their focus, they have the hunter in mind when designing all of their products. From their 5-star crash-rated Lucky Duck kennel to their full line of predator hunting gear, they are committed to serving the hunter 365 days a year. Check out their wonderful line of products at www.luckyduck.com or at a local retailer near you. Absolutely. I always want to make this plug. I don't know why I saw this. Go to YouTube, type in Colorado Hug a Hunter. And when you were talking about game, non-game, agree with you. But I think one of the things that's often overlooked is management for hunted species. Man, the benefit that's given to all game, all landscapes, non-game, people. And anyway, so this commercial, Colorado Hug a Hunter, basically follows a hunter at, let's just say, a Walmart. And I don't know if they're buying a license or equipment, but basically they shell over $1, and then that dollar kind of blows into the air, and it goes down walking trails, and it blows down all these parks, and then at the end, this hiking family runs up and hugs a hunter, and it was, I don't know, it's just so cool. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, I just saw yesterday a short video clip that came across my phone of Steve Ranella. Mm-hmm. He was on Theo Vaughn's podcast, of all things. Not a guy in our space for sure, but that's exactly what Steve was talking about. He was making very clear statement about the connectivity between hunters and conservation dollars, and it you can look around a lot of places and a lot of other domains, and you don't see that. That's not what you see. We are directly involved, not only through our checkbook, but through our activities, through what we participate in. Like think about our chapter system and Waterfowl Heritage Funds and what they do. Our chapters are building public duck blinds, and they're putting out wood duck boxes and hen houses, and they are the active arm of waterfowling. And so, and it's not just the hunting; it's the conservation aspects. It's the other things that you're doing. And so yeah, I think it's it's a necessity. Like we have to have it. If we talk about how we get more dollars in conservation, and often we run up against that challenge of if you seek other dollars, right? If you replace hunter dollars with, let's just say, general public dollars or other types of dollars, you suspect there's going to be some consequence for that, right? There's some give and take that will come with that. And hunters have been very lucky in their responsibility because for the longest time, it's allowed game management to stay very important to conservation because we're paying for it, right? And so we're active part of that system. So yeah, I think that's the issue we're facing right now is the North American model is under duress because of the decline of the number of hunters. And that's what I'm hoping we can address, say, through our R3 activities and the work that we do is what does hunting look like as we go into the 21st century? And it's really interesting. For me personally, my journey with that has been an interesting one. I think I went from naive not really understanding to maybe a very negative mental space with the future of hunting. I've had close friends of mine that say, "Oh, hunting's got 50 years left, best." And I was like, and I think I went through a phase of that. I'm like, I don't know if this thing's going to survive. I don't know if survive. And now today, I'm actually very positive about the future of hunting. I think hunting will continue to be with us for a long, long time, and maybe as long as we're on the planet. Because I just think there's something so natural, so important, so vital about it. Is not only being in nature, which we're starting to understand now the health benefits, right? There's a lot of conversation in the world about people need to be outdoors. They need to put their feet in the dirt, if you will, and be part of that. But even more than that, just being an active part of that ecosystem. But as you said earlier, I think that's also part of just the maturation of me as a hunter. I was thinking, like, right now, if I were to pick a passion, I would say archery is kind of a passion for me right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's related to I'm a spot and stalk archery hunter, and so I get movement, there's activity, but then there's also solitude, which, as you pointed out, I treasure more today than maybe I did when I was in my 20s and 30s. And so yeah, I do think we mature, but for me, I've certainly matured through a different phase on my perspective of future hunting, and I now believe we're going to be fine, but I also don't think that takes away our obligation and responsibility to stay active in that space. I don't think we can just naturally assume that hunting's going to be okay. I think it's important for organizations like us and our partners to continue to work to try to come up with ways to pique people's interest in what we do.
Good stuff, Jason. Absolutely. Let's allow why don't you share with the listener, under your leadership, where Delta's going. So picture, you and I have gone through this exercise and other things, but here we are today. Jump out 5 to 10 years down the road and look back. What are some of the accomplishments that you're hoping that we can achieve over that next 5 to 10 year period?
For sure. Yeah, I would say the one that jumps to mind most quickly is going to be our work in the space of duck production, as we call it today. It's really interesting. You and I have both been here a long time, and so when I came here, I think we called that waterfowling or waterfowl initiatives or waterfowl
there was
programs.
even DDP,
We had
like
a
a
DDP
wrestling move.
we did a DDP. That was a very popular sticker, as I recall. It had a mallard on it. But we've called it intensive management, active management, a lot of terminologies for it. But talking about my perspective, having moved up here, I think it's one of the challenges most duck hunters face, and I've said this lovingly for my whole life, because I used to be this person. If you ask me where my ducks come from, I'm going to tell you from over those trees right there, unless the wind's coming out of the south, and then they're going to come.
It's coming around
trees.
there.
Yeah. But now I understand the prairies. I understand the breeding season, what's happening, what's going on up here, and I now understand that we have a very broken prairie, in the sense that we've put roads and we've put farms and we've put fences and we've done all the things that we've done to sustain human populations, of course, but that's had a very, very negative effect on the breeding season, what happens in the spring, which we now know for certain is the most important 3 months of waterfowling.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I would say our work in intensive management to bring what we have lovingly called the duck metric to waterfowl conservation, I think is something that we continue to work on. I would say we are so much farther ahead today than we were when I started at Delta. Some of these things were just considered completely off the table. And today they're much more widely accepted, they're much more widely funded, and we're currently delivering duck production for ducks and duck hunters. But I'm not sure that we're all the way there in terms of our community that we function in sort of fully adopting and accepting this idea that active management will have to be a really big and important part of waterfowl management going forward, period. I don't see any way to come back. We have this phraseology we use up here. We call it the Buffalo Commons. And been up here a while, and a bit of the history of the prairies, and I've been to the museum here, and the North Dakota State Museum is here at the Capitol in Bismarck, and you can see pictures of sort of pioneers and settlers and wagons, and the prairie grass is up to the top of the wagon. Right? We're talking about 5-foot tall grass, and it just went on for miles and miles and miles. And that's not where we live today, right? I drive around the state a lot, and so I think that work is important work. And we just announced the completion of the public phase of Million Duck campaign, and it was really interesting because we're celebrating the achievement, but yet we've been at it so long. I remember mentioning to a few people around me that we have to stop and remember that we need to celebrate our wins, because you get so involved in trying to move the mission forward that you miss it. You miss the win sometimes, because tomorrow I got to get up and go right back to it. So I think continuing down that path, I think continuing to bring the duck metric, if we could call it that, continue to call it that, I think is important. Ducks are the outcomes duck hunters want. And so I think that's fair and reasonable, and I think that's how we should view waterfowl management, is what are the specific waterfowl outcomes of the activities that we do. Not to diminish anything else. It's nothing diminishing about what I'm saying, but it's just putting first things first, I think, is a way to think about it. Outside of that, the future of duck hunting, this one is so interesting to me. I have been here now long enough to see what happens when we talk about the decline in duck hunting as an organization. I guarantee you that conversation gets more. We receive more energy and more feedback from the world on any other conversation, even including how was your season last year, or how's the season going to be this year, which are two common questions we deal with and ask around here. But we talk about the decline in duck hunters, and people respond to that. And it's very interesting to see it at the landscape level and understand that duck hunters have been crowded, we believe, into smaller and smaller places. Where are the ducks? And that's where duck hunters want to be. And so as production has declined, and as public lands have declined, and at the same time, I see all the same videos everybody else sees. I saw this one last year that, and I don't know if it was from last year, but last year's when I saw it. There were two guys at a walk-in area. They were on horses. They were on horses, man.
Oh yeah,
and I thought
that competitive advantage, right?
Joel, if you're a horse guy, right? But if it comes down to we got to ride horses to get the duck blind, I don't know, man. I might be out. Like that's a little much for me. And so I understand the competition. I understand the challenges that duck hunters are facing up and down the flyways. But the fact remains, we've lost 50% of our waterfowlers, period. It's 70% in Canada. We're just above 100,000 resident waterfowlers in the country of Canada. And the production capacity of the Canadian side of the prairies is very, very important to duck seasons and ducks overall. And so we can't lose that voice for the ducks. We can't lose that voice for wetlands and the dollars that support it. And so I think continue to work on that, I think, is another thing that we got to keep in front of us and stay focused on that. And again, focusing on the public lands, expanding distribution is something we've started talking about recently. It's a tough one. I don't know that there's maybe as much science as we would like to have, but I would say how ducks are distributing on the landscape, whether that's a challenge of weather variability, whether that's, not having cold winters, or whether that's a challenge of not having good habitat available to them, not having enough good sanctuary in an area, and too much pressure, whatever's happening. It clearly seems to be something happening. I was on the phone actually earlier today with a former board member, and we were talking about wind farms in Arkansas. It's a big issue right now. I've seen some research out of Ontario and the Great Lakes area, and it seems pretty evident to me, migratory birds, wind farms don't go together. Generally speaking, there's some effect that they're having on the migration of those birds, or at least even local migration. And so, I think making sure that our migration corridors and those things are healthy and there's places for the birds to be and sanctuary and that sort of stuff. One that's really on my mind recent time is science, is research. It's really interesting. I would say culturally, there's this interesting thing happening. I remember, as you do, we lived through the emergence of the internet. We lived through the emergence of cell phones and those sort of things. And so we were calling it the information age. I remember that in school, right? We went from the industrial age to the information age. And so it seemed very exciting. But it is really changing the landscape and changing the world in terms of information. And people have so much more access to information now. And from my perspective, that makes science even more valuable because, look, empirical validation or falsification of data is what put us on the moon, man. Like, it's pretty important stuff. And so, and growing up, I'll credit this to growing up to Delta in the time period that I did, but science has been at our root from day one. Every conversation I've ever been a part of, whether participating or leading, it's almost like a prayer in a sense that we start the conversation with science first. Right? We start with science, and that becomes our constraint on any conversation we have. And so what I see in waterfowl science right now is really interesting. Much like or the reason we started our university hunt program is to specifically try to recruit young undergrads that are in the wildlife management space into hunting, into waterfowling specifically, is just like hunters, duck scientists have declined. I was talking to Frank not that long ago, and it's really interesting. And I asked Frank, I said, how many great, right? We all generally know the difference between good and great. And so how many great waterfowl scientists are left in North America? Like how many are there? And he said, maybe 10. You go, wow,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. We've been studying ducks a long time. And so, all of our journals are online now and we have access to all this information, but the lived experience and the ability to pass those kind of things down and has started to slip away from us in a lot of ways. A lot of our greats have passed and they haven't really been replaced with young people who want to come into this particular field. And so I'm really not concerned about science, but I think I'm really interested in Delta reemerging as a scientific thought leader. To be quite frank, I would say there's been some, I would call them naturally occurring consequences of being the intensive management group for the last 20 plus years. And that's a heavy burden to bring a new ideology, a new way of thinking into a space like this. And it's taken a lot for us to do that. It's been a big lift for us. And I'm proud of what we've done. But I would also say it likely come at some cost to our research program, I would say. It's hard to argue that it hasn't. It's just been resources and time and all the sorts of things get pulled in a direction. And so I look around and I think about the sort of historical places that science emerged from. And, I hear people talking about, I think we were talking the other day, there's a great banding site that's been up in the Arctic for years and years and years. One of our scientists has been going there for years, went there as an early student, and they just shut it down this last year. They're done. It's over. That's it. It's not going to open anymore. And so for me, I think it's important to focus on our science program sort of reemerging. And again, I don't want to do anything that diminishes what we're doing now. We're doing great science, some of the most innovative stuff I think in the field. But there's more that we could do. There's more we can learn, and especially with technology today, I just think there's so many opportunities. I sort of went around our 4 pillars, I guess. But as I said earlier, I do think Delta is focused on the right things, and I'm proud of us for that. And I think it's just more of the same.
Yeah, a couple things popped into my head as you were covering that great information. Is one of them, I don't know how many times I've heard someone say, oh, Delta, you should just go back to that research group that you used to be, you know, and that's a compliment.
Yeah.
Kind of stings a little bit sometimes too, but it's a
Sure.
compliment in the sense that there's this real romanticism about early Delta. And from 1938 to 1990, let's say, just Delta's just chipping out research results and students and future professionals, and we're still that, but we're so much more. And I do think, Jason, I think over the next 3 years under your leadership, we're attacking duck distribution, right? And that's kind of maybe the thing that with MDC, you know, the fundraising side of it being the great success, duck distribution. I do want to point people back, and this is your brainchild, duck distribution. We go back 7 or 8 or 9 podcasts, maybe somewhere around 70, and I would encourage people to find that one. The 5 pillars of duck distribution, duck production. And I guess I should back up real fast, is these are all, when people say, why am I having a crappy duck season? Everybody wants the silver bullet fix, and I wish there was one. You wish there was one. Duck distribution is an issue, or duck production, I'm sorry. Weather variability is an issue. Changes in ag practices, that's an issue. Public land degradation, loss of it, development of historically hunted lands. I remember driving through the city of Eau Claire with my dad, and he goes, I used to hunt squirrels there. I used to hunt rabbits there. I'm like, Dad, it's in the 2 miles into town, you know. And so we all have those experiences if you live long enough. And that last one is kind of tricky, hunter expectations. So there's a whole podcast about that, and then individual podcasts that I would encourage people to go back to. And then even back further, you talked about the Million Duck campaign. We talked about the financial side. You did a fantastic job talking about the duck metric. Yeah, we want to raise 1 million ducks every year forever, and we're going to. But then there's just such a, like you've said, just, I don't want to say erosion, but it's the word that comes to mind, is that there was a time where the management community was so focused on game production, and then talking about the benefits to other species, other habitats, other ecosystems. Maybe that's not the right way to say it, but I think you get the point. But MDC is a mind shift again. You know, it's you've talked about it's transforming the way people think about and measure duck waterfowl management, and they can take that back into all their own practices. So I'm really excited, Jason, about the things that have been coming and the changes. One of the things that we talk a lot about over our entire career is our relationships with the farm and ranch community. You know, we say that, you know, up to 90% of ducks come from private land. What is your philosophy, Jason, personally and professionally, about how do we strike the balance? How does Delta strike the balance between conservation and agricultural realities?
Yeah. That's again, maybe one of those questions of the hour, or the $64 question, as we used to say when I was a kid. But you know, it's easy to oversimplify, but frankly, my answer to that question is pretty simple. I think from the perspective of the farmer, I think the fastest way to deliver for duck hunters is to commoditize these things from the farmer's perspective. I have watched, frustratingly, I have watched wetland conservation generally. I think of wetland conservation as a subset within the waterfowling community. We have to have wetlands, period. Ducks have to have them. This is not a question. We talk about it all the time. There's no amount of intensive management that's going to help us if we don't have seasonal and temporary wetlands on this landscape. They provide the food that drive the system. We discovered that as a organization. That's our innovation from the 40s, and so yeah, for me, I've watched frustratingly. Wetlands have always been just a few dollars behind the market. You know, it's always like we're sort of, we almost get there. You know, it's just enough to hopefully maybe try to keep the farmer from draining, and then maybe you know, with other tools like swamp buster regulations, you know, things like that, some combination of, and I think that's a completely backward way to look at wetlands and wetland conservation. Personally, I think what we need to do as a society is acknowledge the value of wetlands. It's something Delta's been talking about for a long time. And we talked to duck hunters about it. It's a little bit outside of the norm, if you will, because it's not directly related to duck hunting. But the reality is wetlands are massively important to the environment. I've started calling them Mother Nature's Brita filter, is what they are. That's really what they are. They're a filter system. And so the amount of nitrates and phosphates that get caught up in the silting process and the evaporation process of wetlands, the carbon sequestering that happens. I mean, there's so many. Cleaning our water, as an example. It's become a common phrase for me recently, but the rule of threes that I learned at some point in my life about being an outdoorsman. I can go 3 minutes without air. I can go 3 hours without shelter. I can go 3 days without water and go 3 weeks without food. Right. So that sort of gives you a list of, if you're out in the woods, right, if you're in trouble, this is how you prioritize your activities. Well, water comes before food, right? And so we've given farmers such a clear market signal, which is cheap, abundant food. And I think to a great degree, we've done that to the detriment of the other value that farms and ranches do and can even more so bring to the environment. And so for me, if I were, love this phrase, if I were czar of this universe, I would immediately make wetlands more valuable than food, like immediately. I would do it right now. If an acre of corn is worth X, then an acre of wetland would be X times 3 for me immediately. But I don't think we've done a great job necessarily, both as a community, but just as a society of learning and understanding how valuable those things are. So, I've been frustrated at times too. If I can verge on being inflammatory, I don't mean to be, but I have met, frankly, innumerable people in our space and conservation that have a very negative perspective on farmers and ranchers as individuals, or as a body, and it feels like a competition. It feels like you're against. That's my enemy, and I don't feel that way at all. I learned very early with Delta that 85% of all the waterfowl we see in North America are born on private property. They're born on farms and ranches. They don't come from properties that we've secured through conservation. Although we've done a great job and we have a good legacy of land conservation and wetland conservation, it's still private lands that drive the system. And so, for me, it's an absolute partnership, but I think it's one where maybe my capitalist brain kicks in and say, this is real simple, guys. If you want farmers and ranchers to save wetlands, you pay them. It's not harder than that. It's not hard. That's a businessman. I remember my first experience with what I will call modern farming. I know enough about farming to fill a thimble, man. I'm not a farmer. I knew that early. I wasn't going to be a farmer. But there's a place I hunted in Texas that had a 300-acre natural wetland. It was full of smartweed. We actually considered it our roost on the property. It was a place we didn't hunt. Ducks loved to be in there. There were lots of willow trees. They got lots of sanctuary. And I remember when the farmer decided to turn it into another rice field. And I watched it happen, and I watched this zero-grade system he brought in where he took a naturally water-holding wet space and he turned it into an absolutely flat, open, bare field and then ultimately planted rice in it. I wasn't happy with that, of course. I mean, I was excited to see that happen. But it did give me a perspective on what we're dealing with. Like, what are you facing? The technology on the farming side is far outpacing any of the solutions that we're providing on the conservation side. I met a gentleman, I think it's Cargill, Manitoba, which is sort of northwest of Minnedosa, where our research station is. He and his sons, he's a farmer, and they invented a mobile auger pump system that runs off the PTO of a tractor that can drain a wetland in about 30 minutes. And I was absolutely blown away. I was like, oh my God. And so, you put it on the back of the tractor, you back it into the center of the wetland, you drop the wheels out from under it, and it's pumping. And that thing is dry, right? And so, yeah, it'd be easy to be mad. It'd be easy to be upset about that. I also believe in property rights. I'm kind of born and raised in that space, and I think that's people should have the right, but to do what they want on their private property. But again, I think the bigger thing is in terms of what we can do about it is we just haven't valued them enough. I don't think we've ever quite. It's always been like a little stepbrother in the process, and I think we need to bring it up front and center. Now, how do you do that? How do we take something that has a very indirect connection to people in people's lives every day and make it as valuable as the price of a can of corn at the grocery store? It's a challenge. I'm not saying that's an easy thing to do, but if I were czar, that's what I would do. Immediately, I would make that change. I think it would be extremely beneficial to the future of ducks. Beyond that, but yeah, I think it's all about perspective when we talk about farmers and ranchers. I think it's easy to be in this space and be negative about it. I think it's just as easy to be Pollyanna. These are businessmen. They are trying to make a living. They're making money. And so we should acknowledge that. Now, I will, for me, I'll completely separate farmers and ranchers as individuals from the industrial food complex. That's a different podcast, right? That's a whole different conversation. And I think there are some things that we as a society need to be focused on in regards to what we're putting in our mouths and what we're asking our children to eat. And so I think there's lots to be done there. But generally, yeah, I still think farmers are exactly what Paul Harvey told me they were when I was a kid. It's a man that gets up in the morning and goes out and makes a living stewarding their land and providing for themselves and for society. So,
well, I appreciate you unboxing that. Your Delta's perspective on
big
that.
subject, man.
I mean, it's really important, and it sounds. I guess I'm hit with the phrase, the expression, "common sense isn't always common."
Yeah.
Right, and what you described was such a common sense approach.
Yeah.
But trust me, it is not.
It's not.
It's not.
It's not at all.
It's not common. So, Jason, it's been a great opportunity to get to know you. I have one statement, and then I have one last question.
Okay.
So my statement is, one of the constants that I've experienced here, I think we both experienced at our time at Delta, is everybody at Delta is approachable. Everybody can be contacted. So I'm speaking to the listener here. If anybody wants to have a chat with Jason, I'm not even going to ask your permission for this. Call him up. Call the office. That's one of the things that I deeply hope never escapes Delta. Future iterations of Delta long after we're gone I think that's one of the things of being the Duck Hunters organization is we want to and are available to talk to anybody. So if your phone blows up, we can have that chat, but confident that you'd be welcoming those conversations. Yep. My parting question, I bet you it's going to be maybe the hardest one I ask you.
Okay.
So you have one duck hunt that you get to take. You have one.
I should have known this.
And you have to pick it. You don't get an out, no wiggle rooms here. You have one place to go, one setting, one style. Maybe you get a couple species. I'll give you that much wiggle room. But where are you going?
Well, you're boxing me in, but I'm gonna answer it. No political responses here. No evading. Mm-hmm. I'm going to quit disclaiming and just say it. You ready? Mm-hmm. Mallards in the timber.
Okay.
I just love duck hunting. And I've been so blessed to have so many different kinds of duck hunting experiences. I'll share one really quickly with you. Canada geese, for the most part, have been off the table for a southern duck hunter for my lifetime. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're prior, starting to come back. Talked to a lot of people down there now and talked to scientists and other people, and I think in a lot of ways they're starting to reemerge as a huntable species down there. But for my lifetime, it's just not an option. I was invited to, but I lived in Texas a lot, and so I've had my fair share of really bad snow goose hunts. My fair share of them, and chase those things, and they're not always on the highest list, people's species list, let's say in the South, the snow goose for a lot of reasons. But I was invited, I was sent to Michigan for Delta to meet some guys, and they were so excited they wanted to get me out in the field, and I said, well, what can we do? Well, all we have right now is Canada goose hunting. That was their word, and I went, Canada goose hunting. I've never done that. That sounds fantastic. And so they took me out in the world, and we went to this field, and it was right outside the town we were in, and just had a phenomenal time. I've got some pictures somewhere, still in my 20s, holding up these two massive graders, and it was hilarious. They could not have cared less. They did it only for me, and all they wanted to talk about was, have you ever shot snow geese in Texas? And so again, I love every aspect of waterfowling at this point, every way that you can do it. But yeah, man, if the good Lord said to me, you got one, and that's it, it's going to be flooded. As a kid, my dad would say a mallard duck would rather eat an acorn than anything else. I've since called him and said, I'm fairly certain corn has replaced the acorn.
Yeah.
But
more so.
But yeah, I mean, that chasing rising water, I think if you ask any southern duck hunter, they're going to tell you that's been key to success for most of their lives. Now it's changed a lot over time. Water's managed a lot now, but yeah, chasing rising water. Anytime that water got out of the river, of the creek, of whatever it is, and started getting into those back areas in the woods. That was exciting. Still exciting to me today. Is just being in the woods in that environment. So, again, that's my answer.
Well, thankfully we don't have to choose. You don't have to choose. And to quote our friend Ramsey Russell when he was asked that same question and allowed wiggle room, he said, "What's your favorite hunt?" He said, "My next one." And I'm like, I guess I like that. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to give him some grief over that. I think that's a politician's answer, actually. So I'm going to hold him to. I'd like to know, but no. Listen, it's all fun. I got an opportunity. Very kind people invited me to go out of the country last year for the first time, and for waterfowling, first and only experience I've ever had doing that. It was phenomenal. It was mind blowing. Bucket list. Don't know that I'll do it again, but I did it and I loved it. But yeah, it's that timber's something, man.
Well, good. Well, Jason, it's been great for the listener to get to learn a little bit more about you. Let's get you back on the podcast a little more often.
For sure. And thanks for having me, man.
Yes,
You're
sir.
doing a great job, by the way.
Thanks. All right. Well, thanks, Jason. We'll continue the discussion another time.
Thank you.
You bet.
The Voice of the Duck Hunter, a podcast presented by Delta Waterfowl.